G'day everyone, I'm Smokescreen and welcome back to another video, and here we go with the last round of the Manufacturers series that just finished up in Gran Turismo 7. So the first stage, or the first stage I think they call it, of the official Manufacturers season, and we're here at Suzuka today driving the Group 4 cars, and we'll see this combination. There's a little more to it than meets the eye, and we'll get into that shortly. But first out, we're going to jump out into qualifying, and of course, in line with my new sort of tactic here, I go out with the pack and then cancel back to the pits. And now I get a load of clear track. So we've discussed previously that, of course, the slipstream is now off in qualifying. So being behind another car means no advantage, so I may as well clear the track ahead of me and not give myself any other cars to distract me with. So that's what we've done here, and this is going to be the beginning of our first flying lap. Obviously the first thing, and one of the biggest things here at Suzuka, is to get through turn 1 and 2 cleanly. We do that, but then we do this. We don't get through turn 8 very cleanly, so the Degna's catching us out there. We just run a little bit too hot in, run a little bit wide on the exit, and we get ourselves a half-second penalty that we have to serve, thankfully, on the same lap, and it doesn't impact the next lap, so we're still all good. It just means we don't have a representative lap time yet, and we're currently in 12th, 1.9 seconds off the pace. Finally, we get a clean flying lap in, and it's going to be a 208.7, which actually puts us 5th there. Not too bad, with equal gaps ahead and behind. The following lap was no improvement there, a couple of tenths slower. We're going to follow on with this lap here. It's the last lap we've just scraped in with about 5 seconds left of the qualifying session, so we were able to just about start this lap. Fly into turn 1 and 2. Make sure you get it stopped here, and then get back on the power, as you have to make sure you get a really good exit. It leads into this fast flowing section. You have to get every single one of these corners right, because you get one of them wrong, you'll be likely to get the rest of them after that also wrong. So make sure you meet all the apexes, get the car slowed down beautifully, nice and tight to this right-hander to open up this left-hander. We've set a purple first sector there. It's halfway between two corners though, so it may not mean too much. The second sector split is really where we're going to be grabbing what we sort of think, or how our lap is going from. Degna 1, we don't run wide there, absolutely beautiful. Degna 2, absolutely beautiful apex there, on the power nice and early, up across the sector split. 0.04 of a second purple, so we're going to keep going with this lap here. I tend to get quite distracted by the purple sector split, so I would really just prefer not to see them, because as soon as I see the purple, I sort of get a rush of adrenaline. I get sort of a spike of energy. I'm like, oh, okay, I can't mess the lap up, and then all of a sudden I'm thinking about the lap and not thinking about driving the car, and that's when the mistakes can start to creep in. You put that pressure on yourself and you likely buckle underneath it. We just have to make sure to get the closing stages of the lap right. Thankfully, there's only sort of 2 or 3 big corners left. The latter part of the lap here is mostly straight lines. The spoon was okay. We've got another sector split coming up just before 200R, which is coming up, or 130R, sorry, my apologies. 200R is coming up towards spoon. There's the sector split. We're only 2 tenths blue there, so we've lost a little bit of time in comparison to that purple lap there. A 208.0. Not quite sure what car RKD Tired is driving, but maybe it's a little bit better in the straight lines than this G70 Genesis is. Pretty decent Casio triangle chicane down towards the final turn, or through the final turn, through the 18th turn here, up across the line. Some pretty decent improvement, look at that. 3rd on the grid provisionally. Not too bad of a lap that, actually. Less than 4 tenths off Arcade Tired, and pretty much within the same tenth as Hayate Lily, who's a very fast driver. They're the leader there, the pole sitter, is driving him again, Trophy. So that must be a little bit better in a straight line in GT7 than it was in GT Sport. And then the Alfa Romeo 155, driven by Hayate Lily, is just proving to be an all-round very good car. It was very good at Sardinia Road Track C race a couple of weeks ago as well, and it seems to be pretty strong here. Right, but that provisional 3rd position sort of lent itself to and converted itself to an official 3rd position. So would you have a look at that? We managed to sit 3rd on the grid, which I honestly will put my hand up and say that, looking at some of the cars behind me, I think I've probably out-qualified my skill level, to be honest, because I've got Conzio behind me, GTR behind me, Chupagetti behind me, White Wind I haven't seen too much of, but I know they're I know they're pretty fast, and then we've got Atom down in 8th, and I'm normally around Atom, so I think I've just put in an absolute sort of stonking lap here, and you can see the top 2 have driven away. It almost looks like Hayate Lily is sort of pushing that McGann trophy away, and that they have opened that gap up successfully to 1.5 seconds. Gap behind Conzio is still 0.8 of a second, so not too much to worry about there. There will be some slight slipstream benefits, but until I see exactly what car Conzio's driving, it's sort of not too bad at the moment. He may be in... Oh, he's in the Cayman, Porsche Cayman. Okay, but he's going to have slipstream here, down 200R, now that we can correctly identify the name of this corner here. He will have slipstream, but he's not gaining as much. You may have noticed throughout this opening lap here, I'm fuel saving quite heavily, and that is sort of the name of the game for this particular round today. The multipliers, the tyre and fuel multipliers sort of sit such that the zero stop tends to be a little bit faster, even though it requires a significant chunk of fuel saving. It's probably to the point where if there was one extra multiplier of fuel added on, it would probably be a one-stop for everybody, because we all have to sort of do quite a big fuel save here. However, the strategy is kind of touch and go depending on the car you're in. If you're in a car that's not so great on fuel, it's probably quicker for you to do a one-stop. But the G70 was pretty strong on the zero stop. Not the best on the grid, I'm sure, but it was still pretty good. Good enough such that the zero stop was quicker than the one stop. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We'll talk more about the ins and outs of how we're going to do that a little bit later, because what we have to concentrate on at the moment is the gaps ahead and behind. 2.3 seconds ahead, so they're clearly driving away and potentially could be on a one-stop strategy. Conzio's catching up under the slipstream. He's less than 0.2 behind as we fly into turn 1, meet this apex of turn 2. Conzio looks very close there, closely followed by GTR, 2 very fast drivers that on any other day would likely have qualified ahead of me. They're still behind me come the end of lap 2, because of course, in this race with the fuel saving, you can choose to stick behind a car and sort of save some fuel in the slipstream instead of actually going for the move. But it was at this stage that Conzio's obviously decided I was lapping a little bit too slow for his liking, and he's decided to complete this move and then complete the move by going off the track. He's just sort of taken that compromised line a little bit narrower towards turn 1 and didn't quite compensate for it in the braking, and just ended up braking too late, tightened up that turn 1 a little bit more than he was expecting, and the car just sort of understeered and slid straight off the track. So Conzio's lost quite a bit of ground there. Obviously not my fault, as he's messed up that move on his own. And as we skip ahead to the beginning of lap 4, that quick brief look behind, we see Meta 7 heading up the inside, driving the McLaren 650S straight up the inside of GTR down the straight. And the McLaren, interestingly here, is one of the cars that Meta 7 felt was faster on the one stop than the zero stop. The other interesting thing we have to worry about today is a tyre requirement as well, which is the hard tyre. So if you do the no stop, you have to do all 12 laps on the hard tyre. If you do a one stop, you can do a stint on the mediums, and that's exactly what Meta 7's done here. So not only does he not have to fuel save because he's going to pit and refuel, he is also able to do a stint on a step softer tyre, and he's climbed up the grid from about 9th or 10th or something, and he's currently in 3rd. So he's had a very fruitful opening of the race here, and it's quite good that he's done this stint on the opening of the race in terms of his race, because a lot of the field's going to be closer together, which means he should be able to get on-track overtakes done a little bit more frequently and earlier in the stint when the tyres are new. But there we go, we've lost that position there, and then I do something stupid here, and I accidentally knock the button that sort of controls the recording, and I ended up sort of cutting out a little bit, just the exit of the hairpin there, and I had to pause and restart the recording, which put my car slow on the straight, and GTR got straight past. Yeah, a bit annoying. I went to adjust the fuel map and I knocked like the share button, which like brings up the recording options, which is quite annoying, and GTR got past. I was probably delaying the inevitable there a bit. I think I was holding him up. He's normally a lot faster than me. But the progress in this race is going to be significantly dampened, let's say, significantly impacted by my little pirouette I decided to do at turn 1 on lap 7, absolutely destroying the pace that I was displaying in this race. So I was setting pretty good 2.12s, there was a 2.13 in there and a 2.14 when I mucked up the recording and my car was slow while I restarted that. But now on this lap here, I've lost so much time with a full spin at turn 1. I honestly thought I could save it. Normally you can kind of end up sort of going like sort of going with the off-track excursion and just sort of steering off the track and then taking a squarer route back on across the AstroTurf to try and limit the time loss. But I honestly did think I could save it there, so unfortunately for me I ended up spinning completely round. We got a few more overtakes done by the end of the race. We caught back up to Oa Yogurt, we got past Meta 7 when he pitted, and GTR ended up making a crucial error on the final lap. But unfortunately it's going to be a little bit of a disappointing 7th position, which I believe probably should have been 5th maybe. I don't know, it's hard to say. I didn't quite catch it exactly how much time I lost, but I think it was probably in the realm of 8 to 10 seconds, which probably would have put me around where White Wind was. So that would have been for 5th. So it is going to be 7th and somehow a clean race, even though we were facing backwards at one point, and the points gathered from this result is going to be 249. You can see Chupagetti, one position ahead of me, got 263, and it's around that level of points that I would consider to be satisfactory and sort of be quite happy with these days. 249 I would traditionally be quite happy with, but given I had quite a large error in that race, with positions to gain straight ahead of me, left a little bit to be desired. So of course I went for another slot. I pretty much did the same technique, went out in qualifying, cancelled back to the pits, and it meant once again I've scraped in a 4th flying lap. You can see the timer is actually null as we're beginning this lap here, but I crossed the line just in time. This is going to be my fastest qualifying lap of the following slot as well. So yes, 2 slots in this video today. Hopefully we don't drag on too much, but the lap's pretty tidy so far. I believe my previous slot I got a 208.3. I think the leader got a 208.0, and I was just about 4/10 off. It might have been a 208.4, a low 0.4 at that. So we're just going to be looking to try and replicate that. So far the session hasn't been successful given that goal. 208.7, 08.8, and another 08.7 with no improvement since the first flying lap. And that first actual representative sector split at the end of Sector 2 there was pretty much dead even with my 208.7. So unless I have an absolutely astronomically perfect final part of the lap, it's going to be quite difficult to actually try and gain any positions on the grid here. Actually, Rin has jumped in just ahead of me. He's only 200ths of a second, which is a reasonable amount of time I could possibly gain in the last couple of sectors. Look at that, 1.5 tenths blue as we cross that 3rd sector split there. So we're looking to be carrying an improvement up towards the line. Just got to make sure we hit our mark on the chicane. Don't run too deep. You can cut both of these apexes just a little bit, not as much as GT Sport of course, and then keep the car nice and narrow to the inside wall through turn 18, up across the line. Oh, there was a slight improvement there, and it was enough to overhaul Rin, and it's put us within the same second of the leader. So we've been able to set ourselves a 208.5 or so, I think even a high 0.4 there, and that is provisionally 5th. We'll see where that puts us after finally the Manufacturer Series introduction. Lovely as always, and we meet ourselves on the grid. For this second slot here at Suzuka, 12 laps in Group 4, Genesis G7 in Group 4 on a one-stop strategy, beginning on the hard tyres. Of course. Okay, so obviously we're going to be looking on improving our previous result, and starting up towards the pointy end, starting in the top 3 here, has put us in a fairly good seat to be able to do that. So we just have to keep it clean off the start, do a little bit of weaving to warm up the tyres, make sure we don't drive straight off the track at turn 1, because that will sort of put a very swift end to this particular race here. Arcade Tired and Max Mac 5 are the 2 drivers ahead once again in a Magen Trophy in an Alfa Romeo 155, and it looks like Max Mac, we'll just call him Max, is sort of not hanging about here. He's probably going to be on the one-stop strategy, given he's driven straight around the outside of Degner 1, which is traditionally not a move that he's actually able to stick. But if there's a tyre differential, or even... Oh, someone's off in the background too. I didn't quite catch who that was. I think it's actually Frank behind. But yes, the Alfa Romeo 155 potentially on a different strategy there. Perhaps going to go for the one-stop, given how much pace they've displayed at the beginning of the race. Oh, them again, trophies off at turn 1. And see how he sort of tried to keep and steer with the corner. It just puts him on the AstroTurf for longer. You got to try and cross it perpendicular so you don't sort of put too much lateral load in the tyres. Trying to find the grip on that outside AstroTurf can just mean you lose so much more time. But that is RKT Tired that is displaced with Max Mac 3.5 seconds up the road. But we're going to follow on through this lap while we've got a little bit of an air gap. We can finally talk about the actual ins and outs of the strategy today. So it's going to be a it's going to be a no-stop race for me, faster in the G70, but it means we have to fuel save quite significantly, which initially I was skeptical about. Overall, I don't enjoy fuel saving at all, because I find it so silly that in a race where you have to be going as fast as you can and gaining the most positions, you have to be saving the fuel. You want to be able to use the fuel and go flat out, because isn't the test of the driver's skill, isn't the test of how close the driver can get to the limits? If you're fuel saving, you're hardly anywhere near the limit, but that's just me. You have to, in order to get 12 laps out of this, you have to fuel map, you have to short shift, you have to do all the whole shebang. I wasn't lifting and coasting, but I'm sure you can probably do that and limit the amount of fuel mapping you have to do. But yeah, I wasn't lifting and coasting. I didn't feel comfortable mucking about with my braking points around Suzuka here. Given how close the AstroTurf is to the edges of the track, I was comfortable with the fuel mapping though. I found a way to kind of fuel map and minimise the time loss, so basically it's just fuel mapping all the corners. Fuel map 1 down the straights as much as possible, but not so much that I end up using too much fuel and not being able to make it to the end of the race. So obviously a little bit of practice required for this one, and I was able to find the formula of using pretty much fuel map 3 or 4 all the way through the first sector and up towards the hairpin, fuel map 1 out of the hairpin, fuel map 3 through Spoon, fuel map 3 through 130R, and then fuel map 3 through the chicane, and then back down to 1. As we get to the bottom of this straight at turn 1, just gradually increasing the fuel maps as we get closer to the braking point, up to fuel map 4, and then it's quite interesting through this section. I'm going to lose a little bit of time initially out of this acceleration zone, but then all the way through here, I actually found with the fuel maps on, the car was almost easier to get through here because you can keep the throttle down more. You don't have to do as much throttle control. That left-hander there is almost flat. This right-hander is still a bit of a brake, but then this left-hander here is also flat if you're up in the fuel map. So I'm on fuel map 4 here, and as soon as I know I can make the exit, I start reducing the fuel map. So it was fuel map 4 through the snake, down to 3 for Degner and the hairpin, and then 1 on the exit of the hairpin. What we're also seeing at this stage in the race is Tired catching back up, so using a significant chunk of the tyres and a significant chunk of the fuel to try and catch back up this position that he so gracefully lost with a pirouette at turn 1. Actually, it wasn't a pirouette, it was just he slid a little bit wide, but he's looking very racy at this stage. Was that a slight tap into the hairpin there? He's obviously very close behind, and sort of I would estimate at this stage that given how much extra pace Tired has, he's probably going to be on a one-stop strategy. So that's honestly what I was looking at. I knew that you have to pit in on the one stop, and it's about a 25-second pit stop with fuel and tyres to take into account as well. So I wasn't too worried about Tired getting this overtake because I was convinced at this point he was doing the one-stop strategy. But we are going to have to wait till we're deeper into the race to see exactly how that evolves, because there's no way of telling what tyres these guys are on. I mean, they could still even be on the hards and save the mediums for after the stop. But that's going to be that done and dusted. For now, we've got another car that's sort of coming up. We're moving backwards at this stage in the race, but it's a unique race with mixed strategies. That means that moving backwards at this stage may not necessarily mean a net loss of position. So we've got Star that's made his way through, driving the Mercedes SLS Group 4 car, and there's another car directly behind, Rin, as well. We were just about able to keep Rin at bay at the earlier stages of the race, but as the stint wears on, and as everyone sort of finds a bit of a groove with their strategy, everyone is just starting to see that they can perhaps put a little bit more pace out on the table and not withhold so much to try and save tyres or save fuel if that's what these cars are doing. But given how easily they were able to make those overtakes and how quickly they've managed to open up those gaps, I'm beginning to also think that Star and Rin are also on a one-stop strategy and perhaps just not quite making the most of that in the opening stages of the race. We've got another car that's making their way past now, so it really does look like it's moving backwards, but this is one of the races, one of the type of races that can end up coming back to you. We just hang it in fuel map 2 down this straight so Frank can get past as quick as possible. Got to make sure we keep it under control and not slide off the track, as we almost do here, but then you can see I steer and go with it and then come back on a little bit more perpendicular across that AstroTurf and get back onto the tarmac. There's no cars to worry about behind. But in that particular instance, we've probably lost about a second, maybe a second and a half in terms of actual time there, instead of doing the full pirouette like we did in the previous race, losing about 8 seconds. So we have lost time there, not ideal. There we go, the sector split there tells the story. 1.7 seconds with that little bit of fuel, a little bit of tyre wear on the car, so it's probably 1.5 seconds we've lost due to that mistake. Not ideal, but once again, it's another car that I suspect to be on a one-stop strategy. Given that gap was about 8 seconds behind me, and the gap ahead was just opening up with the faster cars at that phase in the race, not too much went on aside from me just sort of lapping and making sure I sort of meet my goals in terms of the fuel use and fuel saving. But it was on lap 9 where we had our first pit stopper. As suspected, Max Mach 5 in the pits, Young Star as well into the pits with 1% of fuel apiece. So we'll see how many of these cars we can jump. I know the gap to the leader was 29 seconds when Max went into the pit lane, and traditionally it's about a 25-second pit stop. So I'll be quite surprised if we manage to jump Max, but I believe we'll jump Star on this particular tour past the pit exit, because Star got past us a lot later in that opening stint and probably was not able to open up a 25-second gap ahead of me. Given that Max only just was able to do it, you can see his Alfa Romeo 2.5 seconds up the road there. I don't think Star quite had the capacity to actually try and keep that position, but if he makes a net gain on his starting position, then he's done a successful job. Another one-stop suspect, Frank_YT, into the pits on the end of lap 10 with 1% of fuel, so not quite able to make it to the end, but he's on the medium tyre, which kind of explains that big pace difference. Now we're coming up to the end of the second to last lap, which is the very last opportunity that any cars ahead of me have on going into the pit lane. I suspected both Tired and Rin to be on the one-stop strategy, given how much pace they had. Tired went off the track, went behind me and re-overtook me, and has now driven 13 seconds up the road. He's driven past the pit entry. Last car we have is Rin, the last suspect, and as we head past the pit entry, there's no one going in for a pit stop there. So I think by some miracle, Tired and Rin have both been able to find a load of pace on their hard tyres while fuel saving enough to actually get to the end of the race. But that was sort of the end of the story there. Large gap ahead, large gap behind, with no more pit stops to do. Meant we just had to basically accept that we weren't fast enough on this occasion to actually pick up the podium position in which we qualified. We ended up running out of the fuel up towards the line, but it wasn't too much to worry because the gap behind was like 9 seconds or something. But Star made it back up into 5th. I think he started lower than that, so I guess his one stop worked for him. But that is going to be the race. So look, it wasn't too bad actually. I drove a lot better than I did in that first slot there. Only, what was it, 1.5 seconds worth of obvious errors there. I believe the next position was about 7 seconds up the road, so there was going to be no way, even if I didn't make that mistake at turn 1, that I was going to be able to actually have Rin for position. And honestly, I'll take the 271 points there. It's actually quite a decent result, and I will take that any day of the week, of course. But honestly, coming away from that, I was just really impressed by Rin, and especially Tired. Tired did start on pole actually. He drove off the track. He was way behind me. He caught back up to me, overtook me, and then also extended the gap out to the lead to 15 seconds without making a pit stop. he gained so much time on me. He probably gained close to 30 seconds of on-track pace in terms of pure sheer lap time, driving that Megane Trophy while also fuel saving on the hard tyres. It was a lot harder for the Genesis because if you don't have to worry about fuel in the Genesis, you have to rev it right to the end. The peak power and the peak torque out of the Genesis is right at the top end of the rev range, meaning that when I fuel save and have to short shift, I'm not getting the maximum amount of horsepower and torque out of the car, and therefore I just do not have as much power propelling me forwards down the road. So not only did I have to short shift and deal with that, I also had to fuel map, which limited how much fuel was going into the engine. So yeah, I've obviously... It sounds like excuses, doesn't it? I should probably close my racing driver book of excuses there, but all in all, I'm just saying how impressed I was with the no-stop that Tide and Rin managed to pull off. And Max did a great job as well, proving the one-stop can be faster than a no-stop. I mean, you have a look there, he finished ahead of Rin. But that's actually the last round of the first stage of the Manufacturer Series. I finished up 4th for Genesis, I believe, just behind some of the fast drivers, including Twitchy, who I believed managed to pick up a P2 for Genesis. So congratulations to my mate Twitchy there. But that's going to wrap up this video today, so do hit the like button if you enjoyed, and do subscribe if you'd like to see more videos and streams from me. Don't worry, the streams are coming back, it's just a matter of finding time. Do leave a comment as well as questions, comments, and constructive criticism as always. Very much appreciated. But that's going to be the end of this one today, and that means that is it from me. So once again, I do thank you very much for watching. See you later.